Arteta! What a strike! What a screamer! Zola! And a fantastic goal! Arsenal back in it! And here's Liverpool, lines it up, finds the net. Arsenal are in front.
On the eve of the new season already, and right before the Community Shield kicks off, we have a brand new competition for all the listeners. If you win, you could play in midfield for the Arsenal. This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name's Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. I don't know if you guys know this or not. These are super witty, really well thought through jokes that I open the podcast with. They are not scripted. So I just sort of launch into them. And I had a good idea for this one, I think. But as I started to say it, you could hear that the words didn't want to come out right. But the joke, let me restate it, because that is the hallmark of a great joke. We don't have a very good midfield. And so if you win our competition, you could just go play in Arsenal's midfield because Arsenal doesn't have a very good midfield. Are you seeing the mechanics of the joke come together? You'll be dying laughing about this later. Tim's on Twitter. It's Roberto. Hello, Tim.
Hello there. That was a very... Do you know, are you familiar with the work of Stuart Lee?
Yes. Very yes. Stuart Lee.
Yeah, that was... Very Stuart Lee. Tell the joke and then spend 15 minutes explaining it and explaining why it's good.
It's no different than magic, really. It's always more fun when you explain how the trick is done. Clive's on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello.
Hello, indeed. Look, we said we were going to do video podcasts for patrons, and we are, but not today, because the scheduling for this podcast was challenged by the fact that Clive has ascended to the level now where he just tells us when he's available, then we show up, then he's not available, then he tells us another time that he'll be available. Hence my tweet that this pod will be out at 7 UK time. It is now 7:25 UK time, and we've just sat down to record it. So good times for everybody, but we love you, Clive. So on the agenda today, Emi Martinez may be on the way out, to some people's relief and some people's dismay. Matteo Guendouzi may be staying, to some people's relief and some people's dismay. We will talk about the Community Shield, and a couple of coaches have arrived. No news yet on whether Pep Guardiola has left City to be Arteta's second. So I want to start with the Guendouzi conversation, guys, because I think it leads to the single biggest issue I see in the squad as the new season somehow is already almost upon us, which is the midfield. So let's start with Guendouzi just really quickly. And Tim, the comments that Arteta made are pretty benign, but I'll give you sort of a dealer's choice of how you want to interpret them. Do you see them as Arteta genuinely extending an olive branch for Guendouzi to come back in this season? Or do you see it as a, hey, you know what, maybe our tactic at the end of last season kind of fucked up his transfer value and we maybe need to rehabilitate that a little bit so someone will take him off our hands?
I think it's probably a bit of both. I think it's more likely the latter. I don't think the last season only ended 3 weeks ago, so we're not even talking about like the usual 2-month cooling off period. This was this month that he wasn't at the cup final. And look, the fact that he wasn't at the cup final was also kind of a COVID protocol, and there were only a limited amount of people allowed in the stadium. But still, that was 3 weeks ago. Like that's not. That's not a long enough time for all of this to have just blown over magically. So I still think Arsenal's very strong preference is to sell him, and that yes, this is a little bit about creating some value. I would also say, as much as yes, effectively ostracizing a player probably doesn't do wonders for their transfer value. It's kind of, there's not really like a good in between there, because everything you do has a bad consequence. So if they hadn't done that, if Arteta hadn't done that and just kept playing him, well, then he doesn't get his, this is a new broom, nobody's taking the piss. If you keep putting him on the bench, that's very wishy-washy. Arsene Wenger tried that one with Alexis Sanchez once, didn't work. Like, I do think...
To be fair, he brought him on at halftime.
Yeah, exactly. So I do think you've kind of got to go with one or the other. You've really got to make your decision and either say, no, actually this player's good and, we do want to create the value, or no, I need to make a stand here. And even if even if it makes it slightly more difficult to sell him, or means that we lose a couple of million in the process, then that's still collateral damage that is worth it for the point I'm trying to make. So there isn't any course of action when you have a situation like this that doesn't have a downside. And that's, I'm sure we'll come on to that conversation later with the goalkeepers. Like, sometimes there is just no way out. But I think the real tell here is that he didn't play against MK Dons, and Guendouzi hasn't played for just over 2 months. So if he was in the plan, like El Neni played against MK Dons, like Guendouzi, if he's seriously in the plans to play this season, then he needs that game time, and he didn't get it on one of only 2 opportunities that we're actually going to have to give it to him before the season starts. So that to me is the tell that he's still not really in the good books, that this is a little bit of, okay, let's try and talk him up a little bit and perhaps try and create some interest. But at the same time, it might be, look, we might be stuck with him. And if we're stuck with him, then, maybe we like repair that bridge a little bit. So I think there's a little bit of expediency here and a little bit of kind of burning the candle at both ends, if that's not mixing my metaphors too much.
No, it's interesting. The funny thing is, this is the rare situation where I think the club maybe has a lot of leverage in a way. Now, the irony is we have very little leverage in the transfer market, in the sense that, look, we froze this guy out. We didn't want him. We wanted him out. And we made it so clear that now if you're a buying club, you've got us over a barrel. We really want the guy out, and you don't have to pay a premium for him. On the flip side, if the club were to say, look, this is a guy who just turned 21 years old. He's played 4,000 Premier League minutes for us. We think he's got big upside. We're just not going to sell him for 15 or 17 million. We're just not. We're not doing that. We're going to keep him. And you say, all right, well, what if the player doesn't want to play and he boycotts the whole season? At 21 years old, having already had a France call-up, can Matteo Guendouzi afford to miss an entire season of his career? He's already just missed basically half of one. Can he go a year and a half not playing and still have any expectation to get picked by France? His next move at that point is probably back down the table to prove to someone he's still got it before he moves back up the table. And so, while I think we've destroyed our leverage in the transfer market with how we handled the situation, and that doesn't mean we handled it wrong necessarily, it's just the reality of, you could say 2 things can be true that are contrary, right? Like, it can be true that Arteta did the right thing and it was borne out in the results that he got, and that was the right way to handle it, but that handling it that way had a negative consequence in the transfer market. Those things can be true. But I think if we were to keep him, Matteo Guendouzi has a big pressure to find his way back into Arteta's good books, because he cannot afford at 21 to suddenly go from being a Premier League starting player in his teens to a year and a half out of football. So, Clive, I'm curious if you see it that way. And is it possible, given that leverage, if Arteta thinks there's a way back in any way, and given the weakness of our midfield, that rehabilitating Guendouzi, and I realize that's a risk, but rehabilitating him, given all the pressure he will have to play so that he can get his career back on track, is better than letting him go for a cut rate fee at a position of the pitch where we already look pretty threadbare?
Yeah, I go with my gut on this one. I actually hope we do rehabilitate him,
I like the sound of that.
Because listen, he can play. He hasn't really been able to play under the structures and the sort of instruction from Arteta, really. He's come from playing under Emery, where he was allowed to do what he liked, which basically probably lent into the part of his personality we didn't need to lean into, which is the cocky git one. Do you know what I mean? And that's how he plays, and he's got that edge to him, and other fans probably hate him, and he's got that side to him. And the way he was allowed to just do what he likes on the pitch and go where he likes without any accountability, we needed it at the time. We looked at it and we liked his stardom, but actually, football-wise, it wasn't what we really needed, because he was everywhere apart from where we needed him to be. And so, but that was a case for a lot of the team at that time, because they were just a basketball team, right? So now we've got a more structured team, we've got a more structured system, and we've got more structured roles. Then we can actually look at him and for his talent. What I find really interesting about this, and I want you guys to correct me if I'm wrong, I've not seen a single quote from him since the incidents and since he's not been playing.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything. I don't think there's anything that he's said, which, I mean, I guess is sort of to his credit, right? He's just keeping his mouth shut, not trying to make things worse.
I think he hasn't said anything. The only thing that maybe you could say was quite pointed was the day after we won the FA Cup, he posted a picture of his holiday on Instagram. Yeah,
exactly. That's a good point, Tim. Great memory. And I tell you,
Where would we be without the gram for interpreting things? By the way, those of you who wanted Thiago at Arsenal, Adam Lallana just started following him on Instagram, so that dream's dead now.
Okay. So that to me, because what we do this a lot, and often we're right. But we create narratives as fans. We look at the commentary, we look at what's happened, and we go, well, we just go off. We go off the tracks. We just make it the story up, and most of the time we're close. But there has been not really a true comment. There hasn't really been a rubbishing of any party by anybody, although we know something's out of hand, and then we can drag up his history at Lorient, for example, and PSG, and how he's been to other coaches, and we can create the story that makes us think, well, you know what, he's done it again. At some point, and this happens to all of us, you have to grow up. You have to grow up. Why can't you grow up at Arsenal? You know, there are people in that dressing room. I know David Luiz has tried. I know other players have tried to get him to grow up. I sort of feel, my gut tells me, I hope he gets rehabilitated. I know everyone's going crazy over Ceballos, but Ceballos isn't our player. He's a Real Madrid player. We're sitting at home in the Real Betis top. Right? This guy is our player. And if you tell me where I'd like to see the investment go, it would be into Guendouzi. Because, again, for the future, for his sell-on value, and I don't see much difference in the talent. I really don't. I think we needed Ceballos at this time. We lack a midfield, which I'm sure we'll go on to. But I think he can offer a lot of what Ceballos can offer. The worry I have when we talk about midfield is that we're still in a situation where we can't seem to play without Granit Xhaka. And we need to fix that. I think if we fix that, I think other people in the midfield could actually flourish, but that's maybe slightly change the subject. Yeah,
well, so a few things. I mean, look, you have to set aside what you think of Guendouzi, the person's too strong a word. I mean, the attitude. I'm a Guendouzi stan, and even I admit, like, it's pretty clear he screwed up bad, and I was fine with him going because you can't have a petulant 21-year-old who thinks he's bigger than the coach. But you look at the environment now, players like Xhaka, who, whatever I think of Xhaka as a player, everybody acknowledges he has great leadership qualities in the dressing room. Aubameyang, Willian, David Luiz. There's not just experience, but professionals who really see themselves as leaders. And they're the people who can get him back on track if he'll just pay attention to them. And Tim, the reason I think this becomes such a big issue, and I know some people don't rate Guendouzi, and let's be clear, if you don't rate a player at all, I understand why you don't particularly care if he stays. But Tim, let's say we aren't able to get Ceballos back. I think that'd be a disaster, but let's just say that's the case. And that Mesut Ozil goes into another season, if he's even at the club, which I assume he will be, of not playing, or at least mostly not playing. The midfield is Xhaka, Willock, Smith Rowe, El Neni. Because it looks like Torreira's off. I mean, even if he's not off, Torreira's not a guy that Arteta really wanted to lean on. I mean, this midfield, I know it sounds, I am prone to hysteria, so I'm just going to lean into it here. It's a bottom of the table, or certainly bottom half of the table midfield with Xhaka, El Neni, Willock. That's it. That's what we've got. I mean, guys we've been trying to get rid of, and guys who haven't really made their place yet, plus Xhaka. You know, whatever you think of him, it's not good enough. And while Guendouzi may not be your cup of tea, if you're that threadbare, even if we buy a party, even if we buy a midfielder, you're still probably short of someone good enough to be a regular starter in the Premier League. And I think Guendouzi could be that if his head was screwed on tight, especially as he gets a little older and more experienced. So, I mean, how worried are you about midfield? And Guendouzi issue aside, assuming Torreira might be off and the Ceballos situation not being resolved, this looks like the part of the pitch that could really derail us. I'm not saying we will derail. I'm not trying to kill our season already, but this is the real worry area, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And you can see what's already happened this summer, right? Defenders in. We've got Cedric Suarez and Pablo Mari. Those are deals for this summer, believe it or not. We've got Willian in. It looks like we've got Aubameyang's contract done.
Don't forget Saliba, my friend.
Yeah. Of course, yeah, Saliba as well, exactly. So that's kind of defense and attack. I mean, as far as this summer is concerned, done. It's all about outgoings there. So the rest, like the next, 6 weeks now? That's all about the midfield. It's about two things. It's about shifting a couple of centre-backs, maybe having a bit of a centre-back garage sale. And it's about sorting that midfield out one way or another. And you're right, even with Guendouzi, even if this whole situation with Guendouzi had never happened, we'd still need a midfielder, because Guendouzi was playing regularly and we were like 9th or 10th. So like it's not like that massively altered our fortunes anyway. But yeah, otherwise you're looking at a choice between Guendouzi and El Neni, aren't you? Unless you bring someone in. Now, I think that the club, I think that will be the next big project for them, is to bring in at least one, really top quality central midfielder, whether that's Partey or someone else. I think they will look to, they will throw the kitchen sink at it now. They will throw, well, if you qualify Guendouzi and Lacazette and players and Rob Holding as the kitchen sink, that's what they'll throw it at. They'll go to clubs with, have this player. It's the great Arsenal garage sale. Come on down, get yourself a Socrates, or a Guendouzi. And so I think it's reasonably obvious that Arsenal thought, like, the defence bit was kind of done in January anyway, and Saliba was done last summer, so that was kind of taking care of itself. They've done Willian. Looks like they've got Aubameyang's contract done, and so now it's a kind of it's a midfield thing, isn't it? And maybe and again, I'm sure we'll come on to the Martinez story that's broken today. They might need to find time to buy another goalkeeper as well, which might take a little bit of attention away from that. But I think one of the things that makes me not necessarily positive about the end result, but about the process, is I think it's reasonably clear Arsenal have midfield targets. However you rate those targets, it's clear they have Thomas Partey in mind. It sounds like they've sounded out OR at Lyon. I'll never get tired of doing that.
And we wish him well as he battles COVID, by the way, because he's now...
Well, yes, yeah, indeed. All the noise we're hearing is that there are midfield targets in mind. And I think we can take it as read. They're trying to move Torreira on to raise some funds. I think eventually, they'll kind of hopefully get Wolves to pay what they want for Maitland-Niles. Like, Arsenal are clearly there's two things that I think are clearly happening at the moment. They're trying to revenue raise, and they've got their eyes on midfielders. So I think it's reasonably obvious that what they've done is they've got the defence and the midfield taken care of fairly quickly, at least for this window. I'm not saying that that's our midfield in perpetuity. Our defence and attack in perpetuity.
I was going to say, now I'm confused.
yeah. But that's all we're going to do in those areas in this window, I think, unless maybe we'll sell Lacazette, which we might. But yeah, I think that it's really obvious that that's where Arsenal are looking now, and it's where they should be looking as well.
It is so ironic. It is such a cruel twist of fate that this elite possession-oriented technical midfielder who went on to apprentice under this all-possession tiki-taka manager winds up at a club that can't rub two technically competent midfielders together. It's just so strange. And I have to think that Arteta is calling up Edu 24 hours a day, waking him up. Mikel, it is 3:30 in the morning. Why are you calling me? Yes, I know. Technical midfielder. I'm working on it. I don't know what that accent was. Just go with it. I should have had Tim do that bit. But it is the situation where even if we play a back three, can you imagine a scenario where our starting midfield, start of the Premier League season, forget tomorrow's game, Xhaka and El Neni, where's that taking you?
Well, we might be in a situation where the best midfielder at the club is the manager.
Yeah, still and if Bergkamp joins his coaching ranks, which has been rumored, then you could argue that he'd be the best number 10 at the club. So, Mesut Ozil stands in my mentions, yada, yada. But okay, so I think it is clear that midfield is a dumpster fire. It's a real worry. An area that is not a worry is goalkeeper. But when you have two, you don't have any, they sometimes say. In our case, when you have two, you have one too many. And so Emi Martinez apparently, and I think this may be briefing from the club, but Adam Crafton has come out with an Athletic article basically saying that Emi Martinez wants to go. that Arsenal want 20 million plus for him, but he's hoping that due to his service and his time given to the club, that the club will consider 10 million. I would certainly love it if people would just forego any of their best interests, because I'm a nice guy who's been around for a while, so feel free to do that where I'm concerned. But I'm curious, Clive, Emi wants guarantees, or at least according to the article, wants guarantees about being the number one. Even if you think Emi is better than Leno, and I realize that player evaluation is going to vary by person, the idea that we can guarantee that he will be the number one is insane. You can't give it to him. Leno was good enough that at a minimum, he should be in the conversation to be the number one, if not the number one. So, as Tim alluded to a little earlier in the pod, this strikes me as sort of the most obvious conclusion, while maybe being one that isn't great and that we don't love. But given that we are a club that needs money, that needs to buy midfielders, if he is worth 20 million and he wants a new deal, and he may not be the starter, the idea that we can afford to have a 20 million pound asset just sitting on our bench playing cup games, it doesn't work for me. So are you on board with selling Emi Martinez? Or if you were Arsenal, given that this is what the rumor is, would you guarantee him the first choice goalkeeping position and look to shift Leno?
I'll go with the club on this one because they've no doubt had words with their goalkeeping coach, and they know who the best player is, and they're making a decision, and that's football. They can't make guarantees; they wouldn't do that to anybody. And the player has earned the right in his 11 or so games, which he played unbelievably well. I would go back to I remember how I felt after the Brighton game. I was devastated when Leno got injured. I just couldn't imagine anybody being as good, and you can argue he was a touch better. But it was a small sample, so the club was gone with Leno. If they've said basically it's competition and that doesn't change, we'd probably like to keep both of you, but we recognise you may want to go. Suddenly, 6 months ago, if you said we're going to get £20 million for Emi Martinez, you'd have been laughed at. This is a bonus. They've got a goalkeeper in mind in David Raya at Brentford, and I know he messed up in the playoff semi-final or final, can't remember which it was now. I think it was a final against Fulham when he sort of was too aggressive. When you see him play, he's a very modern front-footed goalkeeper that makes lots of saves, very high up, plays like a sweeper. He's a very modern keeper that will look good in a good Premiership side. The moment I saw him, I thought, you know what, there's a little rumour a few months ago about this, and I believed it straight away. As soon as I saw him play, I thought, you're different to what we have, and you could play in the Premier League. And so I had a feeling that one of them would go. I didn't know which one. Obviously, it looks like Martinez. So it's money. We need the money. We might get Raya for 8 million. If we get 18 million for Martinez, that's 10 million quid we didn't expect. We can put that towards the overpriced Thomas Partey deal, which is a great player, but the value is questionable, right? But if you got that cash in your pocket, you can actually do something with it. So I support the club on this one. My heart says I'd like Martinez to stay because we sort of know him and he's sort of been in the club since he was 16. But let's not forget how good Leno was before he got injured. And he played the other day and it just, I know it's only MK tons, but he looks like our goalkeeper. So there is no problem there. We've got strength and we just need to use that money in the midfield area. And we really do need to use that money in that midfield area because the team lacks an identity in that space. And
talent. Let's not forget talent. That's a part of it.
Yeah. But if you're the coach, you want to move the team on, you've really got to put people in that space that define you. And the people we have there, they define us for sometimes some of the things that we're not very good at. And so that's a really key next few weeks, months. And so it's important we have all the funds we need to go and get the overpriced players we need to go and buy to really change the identity of this team. We may have to spend. The centre-backs we bought, we got good value. We got to get rid of a few, but we may have to overspend that midfield area. So all the money we get is going to be well used.
Yeah, and I think the cool thing is, I sometimes feel with Arsenal transfer windows, you guys, that there are so many holes to plug that the club puts their finger in one hole. That sounded so bad. Thank God Paul isn't here to leap all over that. But you know how it is. You put your finger in one hole and suddenly there's another hole that's a problem. Is a thing that I just said. But So normally, we got the winger, but we didn't solve defense. Like, I actually feel, for the first time in a while, you can just about cobble together a good back four or back five, and you can cobble together a good goalkeeper or two, and you can cobble together a good front line. All right, it may not be perfect, but a pretty good one. And the midfield is a train wreck, but like, there's no ambiguity where the focus needs to be. And for Arsenal, I think that's a great thing. It used to be the joke, right? Arsenal have no defenders, no defensive midfielder, but we're buying another number 10 or we're buying another winger. This summer, there's no ambiguity. Anything in midfield, creative midfield, central midfield, if you can find it, we need it. And so they can just focus on that. Chance creation, ball progression, press resistance, bring it on. We need it. And hopefully they will find that. I mean, Clive, you had more to say?
Well, I'm just thinking, I was going to ask you guys a question.
I love that.
Do you think how do you feel about Coutinho now? Do you think that's going to resurrect itself?
Oh, I'd take it in a heartbeat. I put a weird poll out on Twitter. I said, if assuming we only got one of these deals done, and Tim, I'll ask you which one you'd take. Assuming we only got one of these deals done, players we're linked with, and I realize some of the links are completely dubious, but just hear me out. Partey, Coutinho, Aouar, and Partey, Coutinho, Aouar, and Thiago. Who would be your choice?
It would be between Aouar and Thiago.
Aouar won in a landslide on Twitter, by the way.
Yeah. See, that's the thing. I don't watch enough French football to be that firm on it. I really, really like what I've seen, but what I've seen is about 2 games.
It's enough. So it's enough to be an expert.
If that's his level, then yeah, that would be my choice. A younger, fitter, a younger Thiago, or not even a younger Thiago, a Thiago without the injury history would be my choice otherwise. But no, our would be my choice because like there are many different ways to do chance creation. It doesn't have to be a number 10. In fact, most teams don't do that anymore. And, at the very least, we've signed Willian this summer, who is a chance creator. He just does it a slightly different way. He does it from wide, and that's fine. And
it's literally the only way we create chances, to be fair.
Yeah. I actually think what Arsenal could really do, like Arsenal could do with both in an ideal world, don't get me wrong, but I think if Arsenal's midfield was just a bit more, there's a bit more oil in that engine, if the ball just moved a bit more quickly and a bit more freely, and we had players who could play on the half turn and perhaps run with it a bit, I think that would do wonders.
Can I interrupt again, just super quick?
Yeah, go for it.
Even Ceballos leveling up at Project Restart to do that made a world of difference. So imagine someone who's even a level up from that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. He's not a creator. It's funny. I had this conversation because you guys know that I've always been, unlike Clive, like slightly dubious about the Diaby thing. I've always thought really inconsistent player, and I think it's quite likely that's just who he was. But like someone put up a thing like, which of these players in their prime would you take in the current team? And it was like Arshavin, Rosicky, Nasri, and Diaby, which I think was a really interesting question actually, because they're all players with question marks. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, if you could guarantee me that he'd be fit, Diaby would walk into this midfield.
It's him or Rosicky. It's one of those two.
Yeah,
exactly what we need.
Exactly. That is and you look at the tragedy of Diaby's career is obviously injuries, but do you ever think like a player's career happened at the wrong time as well? You can
in terms of what qualities were in the squad at that time, you mean?
Yeah. What qualities?
That's a brilliant shout. I know where you're going to. Was brilliant.
Yeah. Or what qualities are in vogue at the time?
Fair point,
someone like I think this about like Emil Heskey and Danny Welbeck, right? I think Emil Heskey was a brilliant player in the era of 4-4-2 when he was playing up front with Michael Owen, with Wayne Rooney, and he was doing all the dirty work. He was brilliant. But that was the era of 4-4-2. He would not survive in the era of like 4-3-3 or 4-5-1, where he would be the one playing through the middle. And then you look at someone like Danny Welbeck. Danny Welbeck in the era of 4-4-2 would have killed it. But he played in an era of lone strikers, and that's not who he was, and kind of a wide forward. So do you know what I was like? So Diaby without the injuries and maybe 10 years younger, if he was coming up now, Arsenal would not be signing him from Auxerre for £6 million, put it that way.
I mean, it is the case, I think, that the thing that surprised me about the poll, Tim, is that the person who finished dead last by a distance was Coutinho. The only reason it surprised me is like, I don't think people realize how bad we were getting goals, shots, chances, assists from midfield, and particularly advanced midfield. And someone who can drop in between the lines and play a final ball or take the shot on themselves would transform us. And it also would help take some pressure off the forward line because, if you're a defender playing Arsenal, you can ignore the midfield. And in fact, you know what's ironic? You know who's a great avatar for what's wrong with us? Chelsea. Look at the Chelsea Cup final, okay? And look at it because it's sexy and we love it. We were able to mostly ignore Jorginho and Kovacic in the final third, which meant that we could really collapse on and focus on Giroud and their front line. And Pulisic gave us some trouble, which, thankfully he went off. But the same thing is true of Arsenal. You can really key on the forwards because there's no one to get between the lines and pull a defender up, force him to come out. Now, we used Lacazette a little bit that way, and we got some effectiveness with it, with defenders being pulled out of place by Lacazette and then guys running in behind. We saw that against City, and it worked. But against the smaller teams, it's too easy. It's too easy for them to stay in a line of 4 or 5, keep their eye on the front 3, keep their eye on the overlapping wingbacks, but they never have to pull out a position in the center of the pitch. When you have someone like De Bruyne, or God forbid, Silva and De Bruyne, who drop in between the lines and stand at the top of the box and make a central defender make a decision. And then suddenly there's a little darting run for an Aubameyang to get behind and someone who can play that dagger ball. That is missing. And, I'm not saying it should be Coutinho, but if you put him in there, it totally changes the way defenses have to key on you and the way the central midfield can progress the ball. And you could say, boy, it sounds a lot like you're describing Mesut Ozil. That's a dead conversation. So, it just is what it is. Tim, I didn't give you a chance, and I want to get back to Clive, but just super, super quick, since we moved on from it. Did you have a thought? Emi Martinez, I assume you're a pretty pragmatic guy, so if it's £20 million and we have to go with Leno, then you're not going to shed a tear. I mean, I love Martinez, love what he did for us, won us a cup, great end to his Arsenal career after sitting the bench for so long, but you take the $20 million and move on?
Yeah, I think so. As long as it's 20 million, although that he's played 15 Premier League games for Arsenal, so 20 million would be a really good return. My view on the thing was always take the positives because if the story had come out now that we're selling Bernd Leno and we're giving Emi Martinez a new contract, I'd have been fine with that as well. My attitude to this was always I don't really mind. I don't really have a horse in this race. Take the good one. And look, to be honest, it's just one of those things. There doesn't have to be any blame here. Emi Martinez is 27. He is perfectly entitled to say, no, I want to be a number 1. And Arsenal are perfectly entitled to say, sorry, we've got another really good goalkeeper. We can't give you that at the moment. And, it's fine for those two, it's fine for the club and the player to hold those positions. It absolutely makes sense. In an ideal world, we'd keep them both for another year, properly determine who's the best, and then sell one of them. But Martinez has got 2 years on his contract. It's not going to work out like that. He feels, I think rightly, that he's done enough to prove himself that he can play as a number 1 in the Premier League. And Arsenal are like, well, we've actually got another really good goalkeeper we've invested in. And so we're going to go with him, and I think that's fine. There isn't any fault here. I think in reality, one of them was always going to fall. We're not going to have Martinez and Leno on a long-term basis. That's just not how it works. We didn't have Szczesny and Ospina on a long-term basis. We didn't have Ospina and Cech on a long-term basis. If you have goalkeepers that managers believe in, then one of them just goes. It's as simple as that. So. If this is the one that's going, that's fine. I wish him all the best. I honestly, I don't think we're winning the Premier League with either of them. To be honest, I think
you don't think they're good enough at that level. Is it because distribution?
No. I just don't think they're quite. They're not at who won the Premier League? Alisson. They're not at that level. It's kind of, if I want to be really brutal about it, and I know I'll probably catch a little bit of criticism for that, and that's fine, but that's as brutal as I can be. I think they're both really good goalkeepers. I don't see either of them taking us to the absolute next level. I could see either one of them playing in if we finish 4th or whatever. I don't, which is I guess still the next level for us, but long game. 5, 6, 7 years' time, when, if all goes well, we'll be competing for the title again, he says, foolishly optimistically, I don't see either of them in that picture, to be honest, which is why I'm kind of comfortable with either one of them going, because they're both good, but I don't think either of them are world class.
You know what's funny, guys? Like, sometimes we see things totally the same way, and then sometimes I'm just stupid. So, you know what's funny, Tim? You said something that is literally the exact opposite of how I feel, but we arrive at the same conclusion through reverse logic. So can I just quickly explain what I mean?
Yeah.
So you're saying you don't think either of them are good enough to win us the title, essentially. So you're fine with either of them moving on. My argument is, I don't think goalkeeper matters enough, so I'm fine with them moving on. And what I mean by that is, we finished top 4 with Manuel Almunia plenty of times. Chelsea just finished top 4 with the worst keeper in the Premier League. United finished top 4 with a David De Gea, who I think you have to say was comically terrible this season, and have finished outside the top 4 when David De Gea was the best goalkeeper in the Premier League. I think what I'm driving at is essentially that if you told me we finished top 4 next season, I don't think it comes down to the player your keeper, because realistically, if your keeper is extremely busy, you're probably pretty bad. The best teams don't concede a lot of shots. Now you can say, yeah, but your keeper is now a part of your buildup, and I agree with that. But I guess what I'm saying is, so if I think you can finish top 4, which is our next goal, with a keeper who's not great, as Chelsea and United both proved, I certainly think you can finish top 4 with a backup keeper who sucks. Liverpool won the league with a terrible backup keeper, right? So I guess my point is the idea that you somehow not only need a good keeper, but you need 2 good keepers to get into the top 4, when 2 of the top 4 teams don't even have 1 good keeper, doesn't make any sense to me when you can get £20 million back. Tim, do you have a rejoinder to that or no?
No. I think that's fine. I think what you need is a goalkeeper. Like, if you're in the league winning conversation, you need the goalkeeper that can only do one thing in 90 minutes and have it make a difference.
Yeah, okay. I agree with that.
That's the difference you're looking at. Yeah.
Okay. So, and sorry, I guess what I was trying to say is I agree with you on that point. It's just I arrive at the conclusion that we can sell because I don't think we need them to be good, and you arrive at the conclusion we could sell because you don't think either of them are so good we can't afford to let them go.
Yeah.
So, Clive, welcome back. Let's do this. Well, Arteta added 2 coaches to the coaching staff. It's important and we should discuss it, although I doubt there are many people like chomping at the bit waiting for this segment of the pod, and we still have to touch on the Community Shield. But let's just get it out of the way, and you're the coach of the pod, so I think you're the perfect person to address this. Arteta getting his people in. He's added 2 coaches. We know we moved one out in Nuremberg. How do you feel about the fact that Arteta is not just trying to pull the playing staff together, but he's getting ready to start the new season, with his coaching staff in place?
Yeah, it's expected, isn't it? I expected more, actually. I thought there may be a Xabi Alonso coming along as well, a named person. So, I don't know these coaches at all, but he hastily had to put together his coaching staff in December. And, maybe I thought that I wasn't sure they'd be here for the long term. But they seem to be here. Steve Round and the other guys seem to be here. So, goalkeeping coach came in. He's very, very well thought of. And so, he's building on it. And it'd be interesting. I tried to have a little look today to see what they're like. I couldn't find anything at the time I had to see what their reputations are. But no doubt that will come out the next day or so. But like anything, you want to build your backroom. You want to build your team. You want to build people around you that you know that are well in the market. Again, the club is becoming younger in the backroom. And so this is what I expect to see happen. We are rebuilding total renewal of the club. Over all aspects, it's really happening, and I think it's good. There's not much more you can really say about that. I'm much more interested in the midfield discussion you were having earlier on, rather than talking about this, because this is just what we expect to see, and I think there'll be one more person coming. I don't think it'll be Bergkamp. If it is Bergkamp, I think he'll be doing a job with the youth players. But I do think there may be somebody else coming to maybe someone with a name that we would all recognise to sort of come back into the club. But we'll wait and see.
So then I'll stay with you, Clive. Tim, do you have a burning desire to speak on the addition of the assistant coaches? Oh, Tim said he needed 30 seconds, so he definitely doesn't have that desire. He has the burning desire to change a poopy diaper. Or nappy, sorry. Clive, in a way, I think they should have canceled the Community Shield. I think fans, like players, need breaks between seasons to make them feel like new stories, and it doesn't feel like a new story yet. And that doesn't mean I'm not excited for it. I like the feeling that I've gotten to miss football, so I can be thrilled for it to come back and feel like it's all fresh and new again and have that new excitement. And in a way, it still feels like the same story, which makes it hard to feel like it's fresh and new, and I can be stupidly optimistic for no reason. But on the flip side, not only is this, a charity event, and we do want that money to go to charity, but like, this is our second and final preseason fixture. Ordinarily, I would say completely throw this game. It does not matter, and I still feel that way. But given that it is the only other game Arteta has to get his players ready for the season, I mean, I think this game will not. Charity Shields have the. I have always found they have a first half that's quite intense and looks like a competitive fixture, and then obviously the starters get taken out early with the season impending, and it sort of sputters out to more of a preseason type feel. I think this one will probably feel a little more preseason-ish, both in lineup and approach for the full 90. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, it has to. Well, these games are important minutes. Liverpool have been away in Austria, I believe, and there were a couple of friendlies out there, and they've been playing quite strong teams, and I think they've got a strong team expected for the game on Saturday. So yeah, we have to take it, not say seriously, but every minute you have on the pitch is important for preparation, and it's important for your position in the dressing room. Particularly for the young players who are fighting for minutes. I never dismiss football matches. I watched the MK Dons game. I watched it and I enjoyed it. A couple of players there that I hadn't seen before, and I'd not seen Ben Cottrell before, and I heard about him, but I'd not seen him over a period of time, and he looks really interesting. I thought Maitland-Niles looked pretty interesting for somebody out the door. I thought he was trying really hard and looked much more composed and looked much more like a player that feels like he belongs in the team. And so when you have these games, I never dismiss preseason games. You've heard it before. I normally go to them, because I think you can really see people more clearly in a more relaxed environment. You get to see their technique, you get to see their shape. You just see and hear things in a slightly different way without the tension, and you can absorb it in a different way. And I always go to the Emirates Cup, for example. I never miss it. I think you can learn a lot. You learn a lot from these games, and so, yeah, this is another game which we'll learn a lot from. You work out who are the pillars of your team are. You work out who can play at half fitness and still look good. You work out who needs more time. You work out the slow starters. It isn't a normal preseason because obviously they only stopped playing about feels like about a month ago, no more than that. So there's a level of fitness there. We've gone back to the back three, which I think is going to be around a lot longer than what people realise. It just makes sense for us, given the fact we've got no midfield. It just makes sense. And we have attacking midfielders that can roll into midfield. So I just think we're settling down. The next phase of Arsenal isn't here yet. The phase you want to see, Elliot, around playing through the lines and having those number eights, it isn't here yet, because I still don't feel we've got the back four defenders that we need yet assimilated. But it's getting closer. It's getting closer, and I think that's going to be an interesting thing. I hope we get the chance to see some of that in the preseason, but again, we don't know the health of some of our defenders to actually know what we can actually do. So I see a back three, and I see this game as being really important to us being preparing for the first league game. So, yeah, that's my view.
I mean, it's tough, right? Because, you want to measure yourself in games against big competition, but this competition is meaningless. Tim, I mean, it is a preseason fixture. It always has been. I think it's even more so this season. Why don't you give me sort of your take on how you think Arteta will approach it, and I guess how you would approach it, and whether you think Arteta will agree.
So I think preseason games, right? Really, really, really valuable for coaches. Not so much for fans. Unless you're really interested or invested in the kind of the mechanics and everything like that, as Clive described. Essentially, the results aren't important, but for coaches, both the fitness and the tactical element are very, very important. I think what makes this game slightly more interesting, I have to say, personally, I keep forgetting this game's even happening. It's just so surreal having a Community Shield 3 weeks after the FA Cup final. But obviously that's the situation, and were it not for the community aspect of it, because it's no longer called the Charity Shield, and it's no longer called the Charity Shield for legal reasons, I must tell you. But the community aspect of it, were it not for that, it's one of those that you just go, like, why are they even doing this year? Like how the international break in September, and slowly players are either pulling out or are testing positive for COVID because they've just been on holiday, and you just think, this is... There's just no point in doing this, particularly behind closed doors. But I think what makes this slightly more interesting is, obviously it's a unique challenge to manage the fitness of a bunch of players who are only playing 3 weeks ago and have been in training for like a couple of days. And actually the season is a fortnight away, so it's not quite. Usually the Community Shield is a week before. This is 2 weeks before because of internationals. So most of the players will play this, then they'll go away with their international teams. So this is almost like the last training session for a lot of them, because a lot of them will go away with their countries after this. But the other thing that makes this game slightly more interesting is that we play Liverpool in a month's time. We play them on the 28th of September at Anfield, behind closed doors as well. And maybe that's a chance to I guess test some things out, to maybe get the impression, because towards the end of last season, it kind of looked like Liverpool weren't anywhere near the level they'd been earlier in the season. And you might argue, well, of course they're not, because they'd already won the league, and they knew that when they came back. So of course they were never going to come back, firing on all cylinders. But I've just got the sense, as much as I had the sense last summer that Liverpool were going to win the league, I just had this really strong feeling. I thought, no, I think they're going to have the same season again. I just think that their team is just so tuned into one another, and unless they get some big injuries, I always thought they'd win it. This summer, I've just got the feeling that Liverpool aren't quite going to be at the level this year. They're still going to be an immense team that will challenge for the title and will probably get more, probably get 80 points at least. But I don't think they're going to be pushing that 100-point mark. And I think a lot of that is just because the natural cycle of the team is coming a bit closer to its end. There's lots of 29-year-olds pushing 30, and that's very different to when you have 27, 28-year-olds. And I think we saw a bit of a chink in their armour, basically, at the end of last season. And what will be really interesting is whether Liverpool can pick that intensity back up again, especially now they've won the league. Like, we've all seen that challenge before, and I've seen it with Arsenal, where you win the league, you drop your level just 1% the next season, and that makes a huge difference. And I've got a real feeling Liverpool are going to do that. So I wonder whether Arteta will look at this game as a chance to test their mettle, with a view to that game at Anfield on September the 28th. And it's definitely going to be behind closed doors. And that, don't get me wrong, we are still massive underdogs for that game, but that is a huge boon for us to be able to play that game behind closed doors, given the way Liverpool play. They draw on the crowd so much. So I wonder if, obviously this is the primary objective of this exercise, as a tune-up ahead of Fulham and ahead of the new season. But I just wonder if Arteta might think, if we can beat them here, then we'll have beat them in July and August, and then we get to play them again in September behind closed doors. And whether that just gives us at least a chance to see Liverpool, and just a chance to perhaps build some belief ahead of that game at Anfield.
I think another thing that would help build belief, personally, sign some midfielders. For God's sakes, we've been recording 48 minutes, haven't bought a single midfielder. You know what, guys? Normally we go longer. I think that'll do it, because first of all, this is going to be out by the middle of the night UK time Friday, and we got a game tomorrow, and then we'll have to do an instant reaction pod, and it all kicks off from there over on the Patreon side. But there is more, because I spoke to Mike from the Gooners pod about cancer, and specifically about their wonderful Gooners versus Cancer charity drive that they do. It is an official charity. It is a charity where they're giving things away. They're giving away PlayStations. They're giving away drinks with Perry Groves when that's actually a thing we're allowed to do. I mean, seriously, there's a lot of good stuff they're giving away as part of the charity drive, but they want to raise some money to fight cancer. And I mean, right now we are obviously confronting a global pandemic, and rightly our attention is on that. But as a result, it sometimes takes the focus off of other causes, and causes that we know are very serious, very important, and will need our attention again. So no time like the present. And we know we have a very philanthropic and charitable community following the pod. So certainly stay tuned, because Mike is going to tell you a little bit about that. We'll have a few laughs and talk Gooners versus cancer. And, then we'll come back tomorrow and have our Patreon instant reaction pod about the very important, serious game if we win it, and the totally meaningless preseason game if we lose it. Tim's on Twitter. Stillberto. Thanks, Tim.
My pleasure as always.
Clive's on Twitter. Clive PFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
So much more podcasting and content. We're doing stuff with Scott's going to be doing some written stuff, some data work that we will have rolled out. Oh gosh, there's lots of good stuff. Not enough time to talk about it right now though, because we got to talk to Mike. So stay with us. We'll come back with Mike and talk Gooners versus cancer after this. Don't go anywhere. Okay, now we have a segment that actually matters, so I hope you pay attention to that. And here with me from the Gooners Pod is Mike. You can find him on Twitter at the Gooners Pod. The Gooners Podcast is a fantastic Arsenal-related podcast, and since there aren't many of them, you should definitely listen to it. Mike, good to talk to you.
Thank you, Elliot. It's good to be back with you. And yeah, I mean, we're definitely, there's no oversaturation of the podcast space. So, we're thinking about doing 5 different podcasts now because there's just not enough.
Yeah,
it's just not enough. It's just you, me, and this other guy that I keep hearing about, something blog, and that's it.
Yeah, never heard of him. I would say this. I think if we run out of room on the internet, it will be because of Arsenal podcasts. But that's beside the point. Look, you could say that giving our time, our money, our love, our hope, and our expectations to Arsenal Football Club is philanthropic in and of itself. But we are also interested in actual philanthropy. And one of the things, as we sort of move away from the joking side of this, that I've been thinking a lot about as we face this COVID-19 pandemic, obviously all of the resources of our medical communities and all of the contributions from people who are philanthropically inclined, and all of the focus and media attention is quite rightly going to fighting this pandemic. But the scary side of that is that these diseases that we may have been making progress in fighting, that are so important to fight, and the one we're talking about is cancer today, maybe there will be a loss of momentum for these movements because of the focus moving. And also, I think there are going to be a lot of people who put off getting the regular testing because they don't want to go to a medical facility, or because medical facilities aren't even doing sort of elective exploratory procedures at a certain time. And as a result, their cancer may be detected later when it's too late to treat. And so I worry that unfortunately we are going to see a sort of bleak resurgence, not that this disease ever went anywhere, but in terms of the problems we have with it and the need to really fight against it. So you have a great charity, Gooners versus Cancer, and I'd love to hear a little bit about it, about your mission, why it's important to you, and then certainly most importantly, how we can support it.
Well, great. I appreciate that. And Elliot, you're right. I mean, things happen in the world. Pandemics happen. 9/11s happen. A lot happens, and suddenly social justice movements, and it can be very hard to say, hey, but what about this? What about that? And there are so many good causes. My only hope is that, and I've experienced this with the Gooner family especially, is that, there's enough charitableness and enough care and enough love to go around. And so with that, we started our 3rd rendition of Gooners versus Cancer just about a week or 2 ago. And, what started Gooners versus Cancer, I mean, my father, obviously there's a family connection to it. My father, unfortunately, passed away from leukemia after fighting it for about 3 years. It was about 10 years ago, way too early. And, just seeing what he went through, it's always been a cause that's near and dear to my heart. And once Andy and I started doing the podcast, getting to know some people, making some good connections, it occurred to us that we really had, even just a very small platform to try to raise awareness, and we ought to use it for something good instead of just making, jokes about body parts all the time. So
both are worthy.
We still do that, and we raise money every time we do that. But But yeah, so Gooners versus Cancer is linked directly to the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. And when you donate to Gooners versus Cancer, you are donating directly to a registered 501c3 charity, which I don't know if that is applicable to people across the pond or anywhere else, but in the U.S. it's a registered charity where donations are tax deductible, which helps you financially, and of course you're still doing it for a good cause. And what we tried to do is not just say, hey, let's do a GoFundMe or let's raise funds. Please just give money out of the goodness of your heart. We're trying to combine kind of the attitude of our podcast, of our club, of just trying to have fun and provide value and do good things while raising money. So every year that we've been doing this, we do it with fundraising in ways that are meant to be fun, rewarding. And for instance, last year, Arsenal came on tour to the U.S., went to 4 cities over 10 days, and we had the pleasure of doing a ton of in-person fundraising. We gave away Arsenal retro shirts signed by legends like Alan Smith, Kevin Campbell. We gave away game tickets that had been donated to us by season ticket holders, a lot of other merchandise, and it just really was kind of a way of saying, you know what, we'll give $5, $10, $20. Some people gave 50 or more, and we have a chance to get some really cool stuff. And this year, I'm just overwhelmed with the generosity of ex-Arsenal players, of the club themselves, of people that we know and have valuable things to send off, and people who, like yourself, are willing to give the cause a bit of a push through their platforms as well. And so it's our 3rd year running. Last year we raised about $16,000.
Wow.
From about a month or so of fundraising.
That's great.
This year, with all the challenges that you've mentioned and very, very good alternatives for people's charitable dollars, I feel like it's going to be hard to match that, but we have so many good items, so many good things going on that we very well may be able to do it. And with your help and the help of others, I think it's accomplishable.
Well, what is the best way to find the charity and give to the charity?
Well, there's a couple things going on. First of all, our website is Gooners versus Cancer, and that will take you directly to.
Is it versus or VS?
Good point. It's GoonersVSCancer.com. Mm-hmm. And that will take you, I believe, and I did this last year, I actually also reserved Gooners V Cancer. So for the Arsenal V podcast and for anybody across the pond.
I'm using that URL. Screw it.
Yeah, exactly. So Gooners V Cancer, Gooners versus Cancer, and it'll take you to the donation page, a little bit of description of the background of the program. One thing I do want to quickly mention is, and this is time sensitive, we are running a PS4, PlayStation 4, and an Xbox version of a FIFA Champions League. We're going to have anywhere from 32 to 48 teams. Anywhere from 32 to 64 teams in each one. And the entry fee to be part of it is $20 or the international equivalent of that. And you get entered into a tournament. You're going to be playing at least 6 group league games against other teams. You make it to the final, you're going to get a great prize, including the next year's version of FIFA. And everybody that enters, regardless of whether they are awful or they win the whole thing, is entered in a grand prize drawing to win a first team signed jersey that Arsenal has generously donated. So that's going on, and registrations for that are going to end on Friday. So get into that now, and you can go to the Gooners Pod on Twitter and get the links for that. And I'll give them to you as well in case you want to push that out. But
we absolutely will.
There's a link to sign up for the PS4 and a link to sign up for the Xbox. And then starting in September, we'll have our raffle, which is where all these great prizes and tickets and experiences. I mean, Perry Groves has agreed to not only sponsor someone coming to do one of his Legends tours, but then go out for beers with him afterwards. So that's the type of thing that you could see. It's not just stuff; it's experiences as well, and you're all helping a very, very good cause.
That's great. And so you got to go there, Gooners V Cancer. But you could use Gooners VS Cancer, but definitely go regardless, and maybe get in for the FIFA tournament. Yeah.
when you use Gooners V Cancer, you know, Elliot gets $1 as a commission, and we think he's going to donate it, but
there's nothing I like more than the insinuation that I'm profiting off the attempt to promote a cancer charity. So thank you for that, my friend. I appreciate it.
No problem. I mean, it'll only follow you around for a year or two. I'm sure it'll be fun.
Yeah, no, look, I guarantee that is not the case. What I will tell you is, my grandfather died of cancer, skin cancer of all things, a cancer you're not supposed to die from. But just a reminder that, people not getting their testing done, not doing their screenings, delaying doctor's visits, is really a challenge. And there's going to be a lot of people that need the help. We actually contribute to a charity called the Angel Foundation here in Minnesota that, helps people with things like rent and daycare and stuff like that as they're dealing with their chemo treatments and radiation treatments and whatever the case may be, because cancer takes an economic toll as well. And they already sent out the notice that the gala event they do in January, that's their primary form of fundraising, is canceled because they don't believe they'll be able to have, hundreds of people in a room together. And the impact that's going to have on their ability to raise money will be massive. So I just think it's a reminder that while our attention is rightfully on the pandemic and not to take any of the focus off the seriousness of that, there are a lot of health conditions that are very important. Cancer touches almost everybody's life in some way, and this is an opportunity to keep it in focus while we can. As much as we hate to do that and give money. So, Mike, I really appreciate it. Again, Gooners versus Cancer, GoonersVSCancer.com or GoonersVCancer.com. And give, sign up for the FIFA tournament. Lots of good stuff going on there. Obviously, the community around this podcast was instrumental in us hitting our giving goal to the Arsenal Foundation. And so we know that the charitable spirit is robust. And we ask you to sort of reach into that wellspring of philanthropy and consideration again. So Mike's on Twitter at the Gooners Pod. His podcast, the Gooners Podcast, is one you definitely want to catch if you like bawdy humor with the occasional Arsenal reference as well. So thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you, Elliot. Appreciate it. Take care.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Okay, so that's going to do it. I hope you will go and you will give, and we'll be mentioning the charity a few more times down the line, but I'm so glad Mike was able to come on and give us the rundown on it. So that'll do it for now, but don't worry, we got more. We got more coming up. We'll talk to you after Arsenal 10, Liverpool 0.